This is the recording for the in-class examples for Lecture 3, which deal with some basic cartographic work in ArcGIS. The first thing I want to do on my computer is I want to get the data that we need for these examples. I'm going to go to GitHub Desktop. I haven't cloned any data onto my Windows computer, and so I'm going to search for that Lecture-03 repository that we already cloned. Highlight Lecture-03, click Clone. You can see mine defaults to the desktop, so I'm going to change that really quickly so that it mirrors where your computer is most likely to find the data, which is the GitHub folder in Documents. Clone that data. If you have cloned repositories before and you need to add Lecture-03, you can do so by going to File, Clone Repository, and then you can go ahead and find that repository on github.com. If you've already cloned the Lecture-03 repository and just need to update the data that we initially downloaded in class, you can click the Fetch Origin button, which should get that data that you need for you. With the data downloaded, I'm going to go ahead and close GitHub Desktop. I'm going to open up my File Explorer, snap a window to the left side of my screen, and I'm going to open up a new window, snap that to the right side of my screen. What I'm looking for are two folders in the Documents library. So I need ArcGIS on one hand. We're going to look in the Projects folder. And on the other, I'm going to need my GitHub. On the other hand, I'm going to need the GitHub repository for Lecture-03. It has a data folder, and this has the data that I'm going to need for the examples I'm going to illustrate. At this point, what we can do is fire up ArcGIS Pro. I'm going to create a new blank map template. I'm going to call my project Lecture-03. Click OK. Okay. With the project created, we can find that project in our ArcGIS Projects folder now. Add a data folder. Open the data folder. And I'm going to take all of the data in our data folder from the repository, the Lecture-03 repository. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to paste it into my ArcGIS Projects data folder. This is going to be the one really manual thing that we do each lecture, and each assignment is moving data from GitHub, data that was cloned from GitHub, into our ArcGIS project. Once the data is there, we can close our Windows Explorer windows. We can go back to ArcGIS. I'm going to start by going to the Catalog view. Double-click on Folders, Lecture-03, and Data, and just verify that the geodatabase we want to work with and the two shape files are visible. So we can see the geodatabase has a number of layers in it. I see a shape file for neighborhood demographics and a shape file for historical districts. We're going to make a couple of maps today. One thing that the lab assignment talks about is renaming maps that we have. And so here we have one map that's already been created, and all I want to do is rename it. And so in the contents, when we're in the catalog view, we can right-click on that map, rename it. I'm going to call it Example 1. Fire stations. And with my data, I'm going to go into that public safety geodatabase. I'm going to right-click on the layer and choose Add to Example 1 Fire Stations. So there we have our point data symbolizing fire station locations on the map. One thing we talked about this week is changing the colors of point data and the symbols of point data. To make those changes, we're going to click on Symbol. And just like we did last week, we've got all of these different choices for symbols that we can select from. We'll choose hexagon 3. Now if we like that red, we can keep it. To change that, we would go over to Properties and we can use the color picker to select from any of the hues and variations on those hues that we have available. So I could change these to blue, for example. Choose Apply. If we wanted to check out a custom color that we don't have available in the ArcGIS color picker, we can go over to colorhexa.com, search for navy blue. As we talked about in the lecture, we get a preview of the color, the RGB values that we need for this color, so it's 00128, a set of complementary colors, variation in shade and tint, and the color blindness simulator for this particular hue. So I'm going to go back to ArcGIS Pro. I'm going to select my color picker again and go down to Color Properties. And here we can specify our color model. We have a number of different choices. RGB is the one that we're going to work with. We're going to enter, keep the 0 for red. We're going to set the green value to 0 as well, and then the blue value to 128. Notice that we can also set by hex value. So on color hexa, while they give us the RGB decimal value, we can set using that or using the 6-digit hexadecimal value. Both will result in the same hue being selected. You can click OK and then Apply, and that will add the hue we've selected to the map. I want to add a second layer and symbolize it as ground data. I'm going to add the historical districts data to the map. So we'll go in our catalog pane, we'll go to the historical districts folder, right-click on the historical district shapefile and click Add to Example 1 Fire Stations, and then bump back over to the map document. For this layer, symbolized as ground, I want to pick something that is a little more muted than the red that's been selected here. So in our symbology pane, we're going to select the symbol, I'm going to use the color picker and pick a light gray, so gray 30%. Choose Apply. This still feels a little bit dark to me as a ground layer. So I'm going to back off to 20% instead. Choose Apply again. And now we have the historical districts symbolized so that we can look at where historical districts are and the fire stations that potentially serve those districts.